Hi everybody. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to go about finishing one of your knit trees. This is the Twisty Cedar tree. It is from the Cozy Winter Vibes 3 pattern bundle. And I've already cast off of my needles. So you can see I've closed up the top of the tree. And I already have run my yarn tail on the bottom through the loops to, cinch this closed. So I've left it open a little bit here so I can show you guys how I would go about stuffing and shaping this tree. So one of the things that I get a lot of questions about is how to stuff the tree so that they're pointy at the top. And really the only tip that I have is just less is more. If you overstuff these, it's going to definitely round out the top of your tree a little bit more. And just like the yarn itself being kind of like next to itself, if that makes sense, at the top is enough to keep the shape of the top of your tree. You really mostly want the stuffing from like the middle down to make it a little bit wider at the bottom. Whether you're putting this just flat on the bottom once it's stuffed or you're using a little tree base, like this is one of the ones here that we make, you're going to want to stuff it a little bit more at the bottom just so that it has a little bit of a wider shape to it. So I'm just going to be using some polyfill today. You can also certainly use like yarn scraps, or I've shown tutorials for my pumpkins where I actually use cut up plastic bags or shredded up pieces of like newspaper. Whatever you've got to stuff your trees will work. So I just started out with a small bit. You could see I had about this much stuffing, and it's like loose. Okay, so you don't want to like pack it. That will just make it a little bit more bulky so that when you're putting it inside of your tree, it might make it look a little more lumpy. So I want it to be like nice and loose, and then I'm just gonna sort of push that up to the top and then give it a little squeeze at the top of my tree. So I'm kind of shaping it as I go, and I want to test as long as I have enough stuffing in there to keep that shape, then that's enough. I don't need to smush it all the way in and really pack it in. For something like the snowballs for the snowman, or if you're making pumpkin patterns or you've made them in the past, you definitely want enough stuffing to round the shape out. But for a tree, I would say less is more. So now I'm just putting a little bit more stuffing in. And when I put the stuffing in, I kind of use like my finger to like wiggle the stuffing around on the inside. And that just kind of helps smooth it all to like the outside edges of the tree, if that makes sense. I'm still kind of like pinching the top of my tree to make sure that I'm not putting too much stuffing all the way up to the point. So that's keeping the shape that I want. If I were to keep pushing this up, this would be really like bulbous and round at the top. Okay, so far it's kind of taking the shape I want, working my way down. And then, like I said, towards the bottom is where you're gonna want the majority of your stuffing. Now, honestly, I could probably stop here because if I were to set this up, it holds the shape. It's still a little bit like flimsy at the bottom. And if I were to put this on the tree base, it would definitely be, stuffed enough to keep that shape. But if you like yours to be a little bit wider, or maybe the stitch definition is just a little too loose, just keep stuffing a little bit at a time until it looks how you want. All right, but like I said, with the point of the tree, you really want less at the top. Like I barely have any all the way up to here. I think like based on how I'm feeling it, the stuffing really starts about here. Okay, so I'm gonna add a little bit more. And then as I add that stuffing in, I'm kind of just using my finger to create like almost like a little bit of a hole in the middle of the stuffing to push the stuffing out towards the edges, like the wall of the tree. And then as I'm adding new stuffing, I'm going into the center where I've kind of poked my finger. And that just helps to kind of like distribute the stuffing a little bit more evenly around. I'm gonna start to cinch it a bit just to kind of test it and see. Now the bottom of your tree, it should be pretty flat. I mean, you can see mine isn't like completely flat, but that pearl round that you knit, it does help give a nice flat bottom to your tree. But what I like to do is just kind of squeeze my tree and then push down, and that will just help to flatten it out and give it the shape that you want. All right, so I can stuff this with a little bit more depending on how wide you want the base to be. And then once you have it how you want it, you can display it just like that. It would close this bottom up completely, pull this tail, and then I would just hide my yarn tail and it could sit just like this. All right, or you could put it onto a handmade base if you have one. You could use like a little piece of wood with like a dowel rod attached to it. There's a lot of different things that you could do to display your trees, and I've seen some really creative things. So this is one of our tree bases here. So I've used my finger to create like just a little bit of an opening in the stuffing, and then I'm going to insert my stick, and then I'm going to pull my yarn tail nice and tight. Now if you're having trouble with it staying put on the stick, you can use your yarn needle and thread this back on and go around those loops again one more time, or even like every other loop, and just kind of pulls those stitches back together. But I'm not too picky about that with mine. Now if your tree is doing this where it's kind of like bubbling up at the bottom once you get your stem or your stick inserted, all you really need to do is just give it some like shaping. So I'm going to kind of pinch and like shape the stuffing so that it comes down towards the bottom just a little bit. And then I'm just going to kind of push and pull and pinch on the stitches until it looks how I want it to look. All right. And every time you get your trees out, like I don't know about you guys if you've done this for previous years, but every time I get my trees out of my like storage totes, I also have to give them like a little bit of fluffing up and shaping. So yeah, so I would hide this yarn tail here, and then once I have my tree how I want, it's all ready to go. All right, so I would hide this tail with my yarn needle, and then I would just give it like one final zhuzhing and make sure that it's shaped exactly how I want. And then I usually like to find like whatever is my favorite side to display forward, you know, wherever I'm displaying it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully this tutorial helps you guys, because I get a lot of questions about shaping and stuffing the trees. So if you ever have any other questions, feel free to just shoot me a message, and hope you guys are enjoying the pattern bundle, and happy knitting.